What we're talking here, or what we're talking about here, aren't technically peasants. They are indentured servants. But I kind of saw when we looked at this hierarchy, they fill that same space in the patroon hierarchy as a peasant would have filled in, say, European feudalism or Japanese feudalism. Now, aside from the name, one of the other things that makes indentured servants different is that they are not indentured servants by birth. Page 41. You chose to be an indentured servant by signing a contract. Stay with me. I don't want you to have to get these later. Also, you weren't in this position for life, as was typical for a peasant, especially a European or Hawaiian peasant. Instead, your contract likely lasted 5 to 7 years. Now, in terms of how much of your life that represents, we need to realize life expectancy is still pretty uncertain. A lot of people would not have been old enough to enter into an indentured servant contract because they never made it past childhood. But for people who came here as indentured servants and got themselves established, life expectancy got longer pretty quickly, especially in the parts of the American colonies that were controlled by the Dutch and therefore part of the patroon system. And it's hard for some of us, if we're aware of where the Netherlands is, tucked into northwestern Europe, and where the Dutch settled, which mostly was what's now New York City and Long Island. Some of you would think, well, pretty sure that New York City and Long Island are farther south than the Netherlands. And you would be correct. But because of some of the weirdness of the way things like the North Atlantic Drift, which is an ocean current, work, the Netherlands is actually consistently warmer than New York City and Long Island. It also doesn't get the extreme heat, though, in the summers. But in the winters and in the falls, New York City and Long Island are colder. Now, that may not sound pleasant to us, especially on a day like today where we wake up and it's in the 40s, right, after having been really hot over the weekend and earlier this week. But cold weather can be good for increasing people's lifespans. It does things like kill some of those bugs that carry disease and give us a break, give us a chance to recover. And also, when it's cold, it's not that same kind of consistent chilly dampness that you can get in a place like the Netherlands, which can make it really hard to recover from, say, like a lung illness. And the upshot of this is that after a short time, life expectancies in these more northern American colonies are between 60 and 75 years. And previously, we talked about the Japanese peasants as having a long lifespan at 50 years, and certainly much longer than the lifespan of European peasants. It could be just 35 years. I mean, at 75 years, we're talking more than double that lifespan. And what this creates is kind of phenomenon that was not really known to Europeans. That's grandparents. It's not that it never happened, right? People had children young, and so there was a chance you might see like grandbabies, but not long enough for those grandbabies to know who you were. But now all of a sudden, people get to know their grandparents and grow up having grandparents around. So that gives you some sense of what had happened to the lifespan, right? And one of the important ways that it mattered. That said, disease was still a major problem. In those warmer months, when places like New York and Long Island are much warmer than the Netherlands, there are lots of mosquito-borne illnesses. We don't think about the northeastern United States as being a hotbed for tropical mosquito-borne diseases like malaria and yellow fever, but it was. New York's built on a swamp. They have to run pumps 24 hours a day, big ones, in lots of different places, just to keep the groundwater from flooding the subways and other things. And so this area had a lot of disease. And mosquitoes love standing water, and there was lots of it in New York. And our old friend Berry Berry's also back. And not because the Dutch were eating a lot of polished rice. It just happens that a lot of people were malnourished. And then, for those of you who enjoyed the description of scabies, you're in for a real treat. The bloody flux. This was a problem in lots of places where Westerners settled because they were pretty slow to get on board with city planning like those Indus Valley people had done thousands of years before. So you got lots of waterborne diseases. One of those is dysentery, right, which is the formal name for the bloody flux. And what that is a severe intestinal infection that breaks down your intestines, kind of, especially that inner tissue, and which is what leads to the diarrhea with blood loss. Once this gets going, it is very, very often fatal. They don't have antibiotics to treat the bacteria causing these diseases. So some people are living longer, but some people are dying of really unpleasant diseases. Next up, we're going to move on to our pretty familiar pattern of looking at what a peasant would owe to their superior, or in this case, an indentured servant would owe to their patroon, and what a patroon would owe to their indentured servants. Now, that's not going to be here on the notes in the screen. Instead, you need to go back to Canvas very quickly. You've got a couple of readings. The readings are available a few different ways. They are on pages 43 and 44 in your notebook. Unfortunately, those readings are really blurry because it just didn't go, like it didn't transfer right for the print shop. So I have higher quality paper copies that I'll hand out. There are also electronic copies if you scroll down through this document. So either way, we can get them to you. You are going to be answering the questions on page 42 of your notebook using those readings. So again, what did an indentured servant owe their patroon? And what did their patroon owe them? So you're going to see the readings tell you, and actually what the readings have done is they have reproduced a couple of texts of real indentured servant contracts that will let you figure out just what was owed by a servant to their patroon and what a patroon had to provide to their servant. You may work on this with your classmates at your assigned group of desks. And remember, just because I'm not grading it today doesn't mean it's never going to be graded. You need to make sure that you've got this finished by the start of school on Monday. We will have an exit slip in the last 7 minutes of class, so make good use of the time you have available, which is about 20 minutes. Any questions? Okay. Yes, Alexi, you may go there. I'm going to come around with the paper copies of the readings in just a second. Michael, take a copy. No?
No, you don't take a copy. Yes. Okay.
Tyler's paper copy of the contract?
Yes.
I would want. Dion.
No.
Those are the two indentured servant contracts for you to answer those two questions on page 46.
I can't read that. I can't.
He's not bald.
So I'm good. Because I can read it. So I have to learn my brother's handwriting. Or I have my sister's. This is
You can't. Well, don't. That's gonna like give you eye strain. Trust me. Like I started out, it's like, yeah, it's not so bad. It wears out your eyes. Awesome paper copy. JC paper copy. Oh, wait. Oh, I think. I don't know why did you feel that your life was in danger? I think he's saying he didn't like not only did he believe he was assaulted, but his life was in danger. I'll get that. Sorry, JC. My hands are tied.
Roll the R. Roll the R. No, roll the R.
You do not feel like passing the
Roll.
Computer says pass for a long time. I'm letting you out without pass. They would stay put to try to get them all, or not tomorrow, next week. What's that? I'm not sure. So the only pass you had yesterday was, well, the only pass you had close to this was in like 9:43 and 9:54. So before this class started, and the next one's not until this morning. So the limit's still there, but you didn't have a pass out from here yesterday. Swan, you okay? You need to get a drink or something? Wake yourself up? Okay. Yeah. Yes. The pie. Set it for 5. Make sure if you have a phone, you leave a phone.
I'm just gonna put like my AirPods in my bag real quick.
Okay.
They're in my pocket.
Well, I thought I would be in there after. Oh,